I had read the book The Last Wish before Netflix had ever approached me, and I really loved it. It's a book of just short stories that follow Geralt as a monster hunter, as a witcher. And there was something really exciting about taking this world that is high fantasy. It's obviously has a lot of monsters and has a lot of magic and it has a lot of fun, but at the core of it are these really grounded characters. And the thing that excited me the most when I went to pitch Netflix is telling the story of Geralt the Witcher, but also telling the stories of Ciri and Yennefer, who are big players in the books, but aren't quite given the same introduction as Geralt is.
To me, what I wanted to capture is these women before they were seen through the lens of anyone else. In the books, all of the characters are met through Geralt. So you get Geralt's impression of them, and then you get to learn to meet them. And I wanted the world to see Ciri who she was first.
I wanted to introduce the world to the three of them at the same time and allow them each to really flourish as characters on their own before they ever started meeting or interacting with each other. When I first was pitching to Netflix, I pitched them a completely different version of the story. I pitched them a version of the story that actually started with the second to last book, which is Lady of the Lake, where Ciri sort of ends up sitting by a lake, meeting with a man and sort of telling her story. And I'd actually started with that narrative structure, which is to have Ciri be our focal character and be kind of our narrator. The problem is that I realized as I started writing that version that I wasn't getting enough of Geralt and his perspective because it was all being told through Ciri. So it actually took me a while. I went through several versions, and then I literally had one of those aha moments in the shower and sort of jumped out of the shower and said to my husband, like, does this make sense? Can I tell all three of these stories at the same time and not have it be too confusing?
Because if I don't care what Geralt is doing, what Yennefer is doing, what Ciri is doing, then it doesn't matter how many cool CGI monsters I have or how many great epic fights I have. Because if we don't care what's happening between those things, then the show will fall apart. So really for me, it's about digging into those stories and making sure that these characters are relatable to an audience, and that what they're going through, even in a fantasy world, reflects what we're going through in our real.
When we start inventing new characters, specifically, it's usually just to give our characters someone to talk to. In a book, you don't necessarily have to talk to people. You can have pages and pages of description. When you're on the screen, we can't just get into a character's mind and understand what they're feeling. So we have to give those characters someone to bounce ideas off of. There are entire chapters of the book that are Geralt just kind of espousing things. Well, you can't just put a character down in a room and have him start telling, monologuing for, 6, 7, 8 pages. It just doesn't work on screen.
I started out as an unpaid intern, and then I was a production assistant, and I got coffee. My whole job was getting coffee and answering calls. And then I got to be in the writer's room, taking notes and listening to how stories were built. And then finally I got to actually write, which was my dream. I think those opportunities need to be given to women earlier, because the last thing that you want is women to be dropped into my role just to make things equal, say.
Diversity hire.
Exactly. Well, it doesn't serve anyone, because then you have someone who's not prepared for the job. What we need to do is earlier experience and earlier preparation, because I've been doing this 20 years. I've been writing in television for 20 years. This is my first time being a showrunner. It's a really hard job, but I feel fully prepared to do it thanks to the education that I had. The biggest thing that I can think about for anyone who wants to get in, but I think especially for women who tend to be a little bit quieter, tend to get pushed to the background because they don't speak up as often. I always talk about literally speaking up. Telling someone what you want to do. When I started, I was getting coffee and I was really good. I was great at memorizing coffee orders. But I made sure that all of my bosses on the West Wing knew that my dream was to be a writer. When I finally got to be a writer, then I wanted them to know that my dream was to be on set more and to learn more about how television was actually made. Once I was there working with the directors and the crew and the actors, then I wanted people to know that, I was ready to actually run something. And I had to say those words out loud a lot. I had to self-validate, which I think it was hard for me. But at the end of the day, the only reason I have this job is because I told someone that I wanted it and thought I was ready for it. And I just think we need to speak up for ourselves.
So the writers write their episodes. I don't write them. I don't want them to try to sound like me. That's not the idea, especially in television that's sort of binge-worthy. You don't want every episode to have the exact same tone. It would get really boring over 8 hours. So I really pushed the writers to embrace their own episodes and to bring their own voice to them. So it's one of my favorite parts of the first season is you have, you can watch an episode and go like, okay, that writer's pretty dark. Because there's a lot of, sort of gritty suspense or horror. And then there's episodes that are really funny or more that are epic adventures. We even have episodes that I would say are slightly romantic in nature. And to me, that's one of the best things that you get in television.